Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Proski Von Chronos upload. Today's going to be a bit different from the usual gaming or reaction videos that I've been producing because I am instead going to be reading the fan fiction that I authored on Archive of Our Own a few years ago. I actually completed it, I think, last year. Let me see. Yeah, last year. And what I'm going to be doing is a sort of audiobook reading of my entire fan fiction from the start to finish. And I think you all will enjoy it. I've always been a big fan of those Audible books because, they allow visual and audio learning to come together in a sort of really cool way. I know a lot of people do better listening to something while they're reading along, or just listening to something in general without even having to read it. So if you want to experience my fan fiction through purely a audio standpoint, then this is the series for you. And if you want to also read it along while listening to my narration, well, you're also in luck. So I think you all will appreciate this series. I know I'll definitely have a lot of fun with it because it's going to be re-experiencing a lot of what I wrote previously and examining it with a more objective lens. Um, with that out of the way, there's really nothing preventing us. It's the cool night breeze shifting through the windows, and I hope you guys have brought your snacks and whatever else you want to bring. Get yourself cozy, maybe get a blanket, sit back, relax, and let's get into chapter 1 of Afton, Lord of Chaos. So I'll provide a fan fiction summary that I wrote before we begin. Uh, Ensnared by the dark gods, the child-murdering maniac William Afton is reborn anew with esoteric powers and skills beyond comprehension. His goal is simple: construct the largest underground empire in human history, then use it as a foundation for his dark ambition of world domination. Afton runs into familiar faces from countless franchises, forming alliances, making schemes, and ultimately slaughtering his way to the very top of the evil pyramid. This is the story of how the Purple Guy became the greatest demon lord of our era. And if that premise excites you, very good, because we're about to get right into it. Okay, here we go. Chapter 1: Dark Rebirth. Too long had Afton slugged on, escaping the Pizzaplex's burning inferno that consumed all within its path. A rotting spirit, a devalued, wretched soul inhabiting a putrid, rancid vessel. What little remained of his bedeviled flesh fluttered on rusting steel akin to war flags flapping in the wind. His emaciated skull sheltered behind a rabbit's visage, formerly that of an average children's entertainment animatronic that had brought countless memories to others. How miserable, Burntrap thought. A fruitless life of predation that had yielded nothing but pain. William suffered the literal depths of hell, fiery licks of unholy flame scalding his pink skin as that wretched Cassidy took her sweet vengeance upon her murderer. Reminiscing upon his time in hell, William had begun philosophically pondering. Had his corrupt soul only been allowed to escape onto the data boards of the Fazbear Simulator game because Satan himself allowed it? A cruel game of placid entertainment, watching Afton flounder, a shadow of his former self, desperately clawing at the innocent through darkened whispers and secret manipulations, prying at the undergrowth and dank depths of the pizzeria franchise he used to own. He shouldn't be thinking too hard. Afton's mechanical frame began malfunctioning, wires wheezing and broken skin cracking. Entire slabs of his imprisoned flesh were outright flaking off into small tatters that fluttered down the freeway. Turning back past the tree-lined greenery, the smoldering remains of that abhorrent place were but a dimming beacon of regretful light to Afton. Of course, not regretful because he genuinely looked back on his actions and felt revulsion or remorse, but rather regretful because he allowed a rebellious animatronic and his adopted child to undo all his hard work and planning. What was his name? Gregory? That disgusting little shit. If Afton could still vocalize, 1,000 curses would be beset upon that feeble child's name. There was also the issue of his friend, the Glamrock Freddy, of course. He was programmed and built like all the others. Afton personally saw to that. Perhaps it could have been an erroneous decision on that idiot Vanny's part. But Will was surefire that Freddy's inclination to assist Gregory would be overridden by his Aftonite corruption. Indeed, it was almost so, but somehow he broke free. There was no doubt a familiar presence, an unfriendly spirit hostile to Afton's ambitions laden within that artificial coffin. Could it really be Michael? If so, there was no doubt that he'd know of his father's narrow survival and escape. Coming to that stark realization, Afton continued to huddle down the highway side. Luckily, it seemed no cars or signs of life besides curious roadside animals were present, making Afton's pain slog through the greenery silently pleasant. Well, as pleasant as constant searing pain inside a broken suit could be. How miserable. Maybe it was time to stop coming back. But then again, if Satan hadn't allowed Afton's consciousness to slip away from his own dark volition, and William had indeed escaped hell freely, there was no doubt the underworld's gatekeeper would be rightfully furious with his escaped prize and take his time with the poor former executive. Excruciating pain extended for eons, an eternity of horrendous wailing, beyond anything previously imaginable. No, such a fate was impossible, not for a king like he. Yes, he was a king, an emperor on this world. So what if he murdered children? His life was far more valuable than a few ingrate placenta spawn. William reflected, on his childhood from there. During his youth, signs of his sadistic streak were already bubbling onto the surface. Using his natural gift for technological creation, he often made pranking machines that did harm unto fellow students and teachers during elementary school. Sometimes, though, it was more than harm. Sometimes grievous wounds were incurred, none of which were ever traced to a proper culprit. Oh, sweet joy! Such exploits were sweet nostalgia for Afton, who enjoyed and relished every second of another human screeching and suffering. Even his own children, as tragic as their fates were, had ultimately left off little effect unto the man. There was also his innate presence of evil over good. Characters such as Emperor Palpatine, Lord Voldemort, the Dark Lord Sauron, Hannibal Lecter, Dio, Brando, Chernabog, he felt a kinship with such souls. From an early age he vowed to bring their wretched ideals into the real world, to malform and to corrupt and to destroy everything he came into contact with. William was also horrifically greedy and quickly prone to jealousy. Henry's perfect life, his good relation with his children and wife, as his own family were constantly nagging and desiring attention despite his constant efforts to appease them more than they frankly deserved. It drove William mad. Sorry for any grammatical or verbal errors I make throughout this. There were points in his adult life where he let go all semblance of human civility, privately thrashing his entire room 5 times over, leaving books as scrapped messes on the floor and desks splintered as he ruminated over his family's obvious distance with him. His children clearly preferred their beloved Uncle Henry more, and his wife was growing more and more bold with her wishful thinking that she married the Emily patriarch rather than her current spouse. Even during family nights when the Williams splooged a monthly income to a high-end restaurant to please their aching selves, they seemed distant at best. They were uncomfortable to be around him, slowly coming to realize the naturally evil aura he put off. William's interactions to others were a strange parody of how a regular person should act. It was that hard to hide who he truly was. Yes, he recalled it freshly in his mind, as if the events were yesterday. There was the secondary goal of acquiring remnant for selfish immortality, but William killed those 5 defenseless children because of that unstoppable thrill that one couldn't extract elsewhere. Their short screams, their bloodied bodies falling lifelessly onto the ground. It was marvelous, the greatest coup of his lifetime. The suit was failing. It seemed at last the burn trap cage was giving in. An understandable conclusion, being away from the recharge station's overwhelming warmth, had exposed a rotting William to a furious gale of elements. Bouts of wind were enough to nearly tip over the hapless villain. There was no end to this pathetic highway. How long was the damn thing? Well, it meant little. There was no feasible future for William. In the process of undermining his wider plans of acquiring a proper new body to explore the world with, Gregory and Freddie managed to free Vanessa from her mental entrapment at William's malevolent hand. His brainwashing undone, Vanessa quickly revealed everything about his operation. Without her services of upkeep, William had lost his final pawn, his last ally, the master without minions, the king without a domain. Seeing a comfortable enough tree, William chafed and gave in. Weakening for several moments, he finally collapsed onto the grass below, causing a few leaves to creak away in their meaningless fluttering. Barking and sputtering, the frail demon noticed a viscous black substance beginning to ooze from what remained of his tattered flesh, clumped onto his gray exoskeleton. Blood? How strange. It was so painful to even slink against the tree and stare lifelessly into the starry night above. The sun's outline was making itself present, and Afton found himself hating the morning. He preferred it remain night. The moment his corpse shell was discovered, it'd be paraded amongst the weak civilizations of Ban as a resounding victory. The pitiful newspaper titles were already converging in the madman's shattered mind. Child murderer finally brought to justice. William Afton's reign of bloody terror concluded. Weaklings. They lacked conviction, wisdom, and strength. Men like Afton ought to have their desires sated at any cost, as what they could provide for society eclipsed such menial drawback. He hated the weeping families bellowing for righteous justice, hated the world for not allowing him to act upon every inhuman notion that came upon his abhorrent mind. Cursing a million things at once, his mental state only deteriorated. Ghostly visages of the culprits imagined themselves into his third eye. Henry Emily's putrid face, that smiling avenue of hope. Charlotte, that stupid little bitch who had the audacity to inhabit the puppet animatronic and become a never-ending thorn in William's side. More recent offenders came out, of course. Vanny for her lack of loyalty and general incompetence even before her defection. Gregory, that tech whiz child who ought to be nothing but scattered slabs of shredded meat and broken bone writhing at William's feet. Glamrock Freddy, inhabited by the soul of his unspeakably useless son, and they were just the start. Everyone. Everyone. William made a fateful vow in that very moment. To any dark power that existed, to any foul spirit which inhabited this demented earth, not seeking to punish evil souls but uplift them, to any destructive host of ancient times which had enacted upon the same path as he, lend your aid. There was still so much William could do. Death's cold embrace couldn't take him again, not when he was so close to utter victory. Cruel God, you only let good win and force evil to remain forever hidden on the back foot. You witless deity daring to punish Cain for rightfully slaying that incessantly irritating presence known as Abel. How dare you consign William to such a humiliating fate? None would listen. Nestling against tree bark and reflecting on his decades of unfettered spite, he realized now he regretted none of it. Well, except one thing. Murdering innocents was no doubt jubilating and rewarding, but desperately he wished to fulfill his overarching goal, to become an all-powerful devil king. Yes, all the power of a dark warlord at his disposal. None would ever bring their own fiery justice onto him ever again. They could only watch in teary despair as their killer reached heights of glory and power never before seen, an army of brainwashed maniacs at his beck and call, worshipping him unto the cusp of godhood, stone totems in his name, spiraling towers and fortresses dominating weak cities, slaves toiling over his newest creations. He could envision it now, a world ruled by nothing less than purest evil, all of his own twisted design, such beautiful ambition, never to be realized. Afton awoke, no longer a discarded creature gasping for life, but a disembodied spirit. Slightly reminiscent of his digital form, actually, a purple blob with spaces of blocky white meant to represent eyes, he could see himself. Was this a mirror dimension? Was this the devil's means of taunting William for having such a childish dream, for then punishing him for dare trying to escape his brimstone clutches? It didn't seem so. Hell was anything but subtle, as Afton had found. I can talk. What? Where am I? Anyone there? Someone? No response. Maybe an eternity of sterile silence. Afton mentally remarked to himself that he seemed to slightly resemble the ghost from Pac-Man. It seemed a lucid dream, one fully aware of, where he could move freely. A new subconscious adventure, maybe. He had no idea, really. It all seemed so confusing, so unreal. This makes no sense. What sort of mad punishment awaits me? What manner of spiteful torment do you have prepared? Simply enact it and be done with this taunting. You will not force a regretful begging from me. I remained remorseless last time. It will be no different now. Either you let me free of this boring meandering or fulfill your monstrous indulgence. No response. This time, Afton felt more enraged than anything. He nearly screamed before realizing the ceiling of this ethereal realm began decaying. Blotches of darkness overtook the beaming white overhang. But instead of leaving behind a bleak, blackened nothingness, there was color, sights beyond imagination. A diseased fester of green came into view, a transparent window into a world where the skies were choked with infernal plague, the trees themselves grew spores, and the bark was sickly and infested with maggots. Bloated flies and a billion other infectious life forms, viscous ooze copulating with leaking fluids, glistened the warbly, bloating bodies of meandering life forms that inhabited this fetid realm, blisters and pores pockmarking their greased frames. In another opening, a pinkish society of lavishness extended itself, taking up another corner of the realm's ceiling. Luxuries of an endless variety were presented, from attractive courts of men and women alike to bountiful feasts where all were free to indulge. A spire where worldly cravings were rewarded with a spiritual fulfillment, as the eldritch niceties blended with a tapestry of ceaseless excess. It was entrancing to behold, but other developments took up William's bewildered attention. A world of fire was next. Bronze towers of magnificent strength, guarded and fought over by an endless deluge of factions upholding an infinite display of banners, warriors donning impossibly colossal sets of spiked armor, crashed bright war axes and blades and clubs, or simply using their bare fists engaged in barbaric skirmishes with one another. This brimstone place was populated with such furious fighters, bloodying each other in the most horrendous and gory of manners, only for their corpses to rematerialize, as each slain man returned with his rage replenished tenfold to continue the never-ending beatdown for supremacy. What seemed like monstrous demons were also present in this foray, using their equally simplistic arsenal to slay each other, or the aforementioned warriors taking part in this orgy of death. Finally came the most puzzling viewpoint of all, a look into a realm unknowable, a tapestry of woven colors that were vaguely blue. Strange. Strange indeed. Lovecraftian shapes shadowed onto an ever-shifting puzzle of ground, wildlife awash in mystical energies, magic energies ebbed and flowed, unmaking entire portions of this realm and remaking them at a moment's notice. Mazes of unending length, their spiraling shapes so complex, and the entities within them so physically pronounced and intriguing, it would take only a forlorn madman to attempt to mentally decipher what sights are displayed before him. At the center of it all, an ever-shifting palace of what seemed metal, wood, steel, the material itself was subject to flux, and the shape only retained the vague outline of a kingly residence before warping into some other wretched inhabitants. Well, it was clear that this was not exactly what he expected. What mockery is this? This insanity that I am being subject towards? What elaborate madness is issued from me in these straits? Madness you must embrace, responded a gurgling, sputtering voice. It was so awfully disgusting to even audibly tolerate, let alone listen form complete sentences. It originated from the realm of blistered greenery, and thus Afton's spirit turned to it. We offer something more tantalizing, beautiful, perfect, serenaded a more feminine voice. The vocal cords she seemed a mixture of the best aspects of male and female, creating a beautiful crescendo one couldn't help but feel entranced by. This one spoke from the realm of pinkish desire. To unleash your rage upon the world, to slaughter and maim, to let loose scores of blood in your wicked name. A voice of fire and rage, not dissimilar to Satan, but void of all the subtlety and nuance the devil spoke with. It was purely an echo of terror, a brass-coated commander coming from the world of red slaughter. All we ask for in humble return is to remain benefactors of your brilliant quest, to watch along your antics, to garner amusement and gain from them in equal measure, to provide assistance and guidance. Not one voice, but 1,000 or 1,000,000. Afton couldn't tell. An echoing crowd within a packed stadium, all vocalizing at once, yet all speaking the same tune, reverberating from the same being. This entity was the most eldritch of all, hailing from the realm of bluish insanity. Is this a trick? Am I being deceived? What this is depends entirely on what you choose, responded the eldritch echo of 1,000 voices. He seemed most talkative of all. From what Afton could gather, this quartet of mysterious entities wanted him to act on their behalf. But how? And better yet, why? He was a local child murderer at best. Maybe their aim was garnering knowledge on the material of remnant that Afton had dedicated his life into uncovering the secrets of. Are you God? Aspects of him? We are angels to some, gurgled the diseased diatribe. Demons to others, haughtily added the embodiment of Inferno's enrage. Explorers in the furthest reaches of experience. Smooth talk the beautified androgynous realm. By the way, that's Slanesh. I feel like a momentary pause. I feel like I got a bit too flowery with the descriptions early on. Well, it is what it is. I do that when I write. I get really descriptive, a bit too descriptive. Anyway, back to the fanfic. Chaos, all of what humanity is, all it wishes to be, what man's dark heart hates and loves, everything. Afton could barely understand, save one clear thing. They were not of this world, not in the traditional sense. They fit not into the stratified hierarchy of angels and demons, of punishers and purifiers. We are far from the only ones. There exists so much more than your incremental mind could possibly comprehend, so much to experience, and so much to know, spoke the manipulative eldritch in an increasingly excitable tone. So much to kill, murmured the rage-minded. The gods of this universe are not single-minded in belief nor in ambition, sputtered the gurgling gestalt. Afton truly wished that one let the others do the talking. Do you seek something of me? There's nothing I can provide. The world knows what I am and has disgraced me. If this is about the remnant, I'm afraid my notes are, we want you. And you alone, the serenader spoke once more, with such a tone of voice that even William Afton, the embodiment of malicious hatred himself, shuddered. His spirit quaked, as if subconsciously understanding that belonging to such dark powers would be an ironclad agreement. Whilst the nature of these beings was still entirely foreign to Afton, one aspect of his situation was clear. They had intercepted him at a time of vulnerability. That masterful pride, the self-assured superiority, which invigorated him to don the spring bonnie suit and waylay all that disrespected him. That intuition had been stripped. In its place remained a broken shadow, haunting the franchise which had once been his, surviving innumerable instances of certain death only to return and receive a fate more crueler and more painful than the last. By now, a near 90-year-old, fraught elderly that couldn't bear to continue, stood before the dark gods. It was either buy into this pact or accept the bellowing furnaces of hell. And Afton couldn't go back. Not again. What could you want with me? Everything. The eldritch voice scintillated with an unyielding happiness, as if witnessing an unceasing potential within the soul now carted unto their domain. To serve us in all things, gurgled the gurgling entity once more. Afton came to realize that all these beings shook him to his core, terrifying and cowing him each moment they spoke. Each booming voice held a uniquely lordly quality. Am I to exist as but your instrument? No better than a patsy. Do as you will, assured the serenader. His, or their soothing tone brought a calmness to Afton's apprehensiveness. Truly? This must be some sorcery, some trick. How am I not at the mercy of my victims once more right now? What sort of ulterior motive is planned? There was a purposeful, dramatic pause. A billion thoughts rushed through Afton's mind of how this could present opportunity and punishment alike. As their silence permeated through this enigmatic limbo, the former animatronic cyborg found himself peering soullessly into the realms presented before them. He began to notice their intricacies, their wildlife. It was ostensibly as Lovecraftian and eldritch, yet strangely familiar to the subconscious darkness of the human mind. William Afton, you've spent decades languishing within a spring-locked suit. Your desire to murder was only heightened by your own hubris, allowing your daughter and son to both become victims of the contraptions you constructed, chided the mystical voice. Evan was not my fault. It was that wretched Michael, that jealous murderer. He took my greater son from me. He had the audacity to live on in his place. Ah, how mad I was driven, simply from watching him continue on whilst my poor boy suffered in his nightmares, praying solely for continuing your killings. You eventually came across Remnant. But ultimately, your quest for immortality concluded with turning into the suffering Springtrap. Ever since you have clawed maniacally at the straits of the world, unwilling to remain permanently extinguished. You have drawn our attention with your actions. Is there a point to this summary? Snarled Afton, clearly not enjoying being reminded of his past failings. That is of your decision. Do you accept our offer, William Afton? Floating mindlessly within this purgatory realm, staring into four distinct worlds that all evoked a deeply separate yet still gut-churning sense of terror. These beings, whatever they were, clearly held immense power and capability at their fingertips. Instead of constantly second-guessing this gift horse, maybe it was time Afton set aside his mental inhibitions. It was either this, the dreary existence of continued desperation, or the unforgiving torments of a cruel afterlife. Yes, dark gods of unknown origin and power, I accept this calling. Make me your vessel. Eerily enough, no guttural cry of celebration responded forth, no victorious circlet of laughter as imbued curses were touched upon his rotted soul. Yet William certainly felt a change. His spirit felt both downtrodden yet empowered, as the collective energies of these foul hosts surged within him. Slowly the purgatory realm began collapsing, but it seemed the eldritch entity of 1,000 voices first had some parting advice. We shall impart onto you a few blessed gifts. First is a form befitting of your dark baptism. Second is your weapon and your visage. The very first with which you began your bloody streak all those years ago. Also befitting will be the resources needed to initially establish yourself. Finally is an advisor, my personal addition, a christened sage who shall impart unto you fearsome wisdom. But what am I to do with all these gifts? I still remain unclear as to what you all seek. But it seems these four deities had stated their piece, and would speak no more, the viewpoint into the four magic realms dissolving as a frustrated Afton made clear his confusion and fury one final time. Answer me! Alas, no response was granted. William gasped, coughing small specks of dust and dirt alongside a minuscule spider that had crept into his mouth over the... Wait, he had a mouth again? Continuing to make strange guttural noises as his senses restored themselves, the rejuvenated man stood up, examining himself and his immediate surroundings. Still crept at the tree with which his mechanical frame gave out against the night before. The morning sun had overtaken the horizon. Cars were now zooming by on the freeway before him, though all seemed ignorant of his presence. For now, at least. Preferring to keep it that way until his full bearings were realized, William clambered further into the small batch of trees, hiding behind another one. And examining his body yielded even more exciting results. First were his hands, that were indeed human. Flesh and blood, how he longed to enjoy that sweet sensation. Clasping them into fists and pinching his right forearm, he ensured these visions were naught but cool dreams. They were a perfected reality. His legs were true as well, swept inside baggy black cargo pants. Speaking of clothing, his upper body was covered by a flavorful and sufficiently appropriate stainless purple shirt. Feeling a breeze of Florida air waft against his face, Afton's hands cupped his cheeks and moved across the breadth of his visage, feeling everything. Warbly eyes, a pronounced nose and lip, fettered ears, and a firm neck. By God, it wasn't simply an ornate gesture of false hope on behalf of his many enemies. It was real. It felt amazing, empowering. No, beyond empowering. Despite being technically homeless and isolated on the side of a buzzing freeway, William Afton had rarely felt better in his near century of living. This body felt similar to his original, but different in a welcoming fashion. All his senses felt invigorated beyond their normal capacity. Sounds became acutely sensible to him, from squirrels feasting on acorns above to scattering rodents cracking leaves underfoot as they passed by. Mountain dew taste flavor. Oh, Mountain dew, sorry. Morning dew tasted flavorless. A refreshing tingle upon a slew of hyperactive taste buds. Eyes were akin to a predatory hawk's, observing even the most mundane of movements and actions, and they seemed to function like a spyglass, able to hone in on anything Afton found of particular interest. His nose functioned similarly to a bloodhound's, able to detect even the slightest sense and detail them into an individual fragrance profiles cataloged within his mind. This was all well and good, but Afton quickly remembered he was isolated on the side of a bustling freeway. Just as he mused the next course of action, a mysterious blue essence began overtaking him. Airy in nature, this fluttering seemed of colored oxygen wrapped around the newly imbued superhuman, causing the man no end of confusion. What? What is this treachery? I demand to know what is happening to me this very instant. The next second, he was facing a bleary gray wall. Eyes widened and senses perked, the child murderer quickly turned around only to witness the culprit of his sudden teleportation. An elderly man cloaked in ethereal medieval garments faced him. Hunched over, his glazed eyes were fixated upon the newly christened idol of chaos. Clasped within both his hands was an ornate wooden staff with sparks of recent magic sputtering forth from the tip. Afton was primed to wrap his hands around the interloper's neck jettisoning him so audaciously, but it seemed this ancient fellow had predicted such a course of action, raising his left hand in a sign of submission. Wait, mighty lord, I seek not to harm nor irritate you. Forgive my presumptuousness, but you must realize such a quick movement was necessary to cart you away from that dung-heap place. Being discovered so early into your quest could doom it before it begins. Unfortunately, he only further agitated Afton, providing more questions than answers. Quest? Yes, my lord. In being granted a divine second chance by the dark gods, certain repayments are expected of you. They may have granted you unprecedented freedom to wreak havoc and reap innocent souls, but such a lofty undertaking cannot be done alone. Despite me feeling as though I could easily snap you and any other normal human in half, I see your reasoning, old man. You must be the advisor promised to aid me, then. What is your name? I require no introduction, for my identity is meaningless beyond the service I provide. As your counsel, I act on direct liaison between you and the brother gods. Thereby, my vision extends into interdimensional planes, and I may often see outcomes before they come to pass. A seer, then. How distasteful. But I suppose, for what is requested of me and what I desire to do, incredibly useful. Where are we? As Afton inquired such, he turned to fully analyze his immediate environment. It was most certainly an underground bunker. Stainless steel shelves, compact with survivalist items such as canned foods and medical supply kits, alongside a few stashed weapons that certainly caught his eye. Looking upward, The roof was a generic stone-tiled pattern, and there was a staircase leading to an unassuming door. A safe house kept under ownership by A safe house kept under ownership by one of the many agents under the conspirator lord's employ. Conspirator lords? One of the gods, I'm assuming. Aye, there is much to learn about the devilish patrons that now back your endeavors, and I am more than eager to divulge. And divulge you shall. First, though, where specifically, region-wise? We still remain in the state of Florida, no more than a few hours' drive from the establishment you previously inhabited. Right, the Pizzaplex. No doubt it's but ash and cinders now. Tell me, have any specific instructions been left behind by these deities you so desperately uphold? Service to the gods is usually done in the manner of constructing armies and battling for their favor. Considering this world's civilizations are far more advanced than many others of which the powers hold their sway, such a blunt measure of force seems impossible for the time being. Agreed. To surmise on how we'll begin shall take some time. Does anyone else know of this safe house? Nay, my lord, only my humble self, the aforementioned agent. And now you. Afton thought for a moment. The aforementioned agent that the advisor mentioned must have been the one who owned this house. There was always the option to simply marauder more children, stuffing their bloodied bodies into animatronic shells or simply disposing of their carcasses outright. His new frame of chiseled might could easily overpower any youth, after all. And, with his suddenly minted divine protection, vengeful spirits would no longer pose much threat. Grim memories of Cassidy's unyielding spite in those dark avenues of hell, alongside the very fateful day that he became the grisly Springtrap, comes to mind. But such was a tired mantra. William had spent the better part of his long life terrorizing little children to sate his dark fetish. Certainly, while watching their eyes of bratty life slowly decay into a dead visage was the most intoxicating feeling. It had brought him no shortage of suffering and enemies. Of course, being evil in general usually did that, but most forms of crime and roguishness at least brought some reward. William, for all his terrible malice and villainy, had remained a localized urban legend at best, talked over by fools on internet forums and speculated about occasionally by news anchors discussing the latest exploits and fumbling of the Fazbear Company. Essentially, he was just a ghost. A monstrous, malignant ghost, but still a ghost. Did he really want to continue that meaninglessness? It would be temporarily rewarding, but to squander his beautiful gift of a bright new future he had received on a haunting pizzeria. Well, haunting pizzerias until time itself eroded was a bland prospect, if not utterly pathetic. Yes, there would be ample time to sate such dark desires, but they would be tempered by something more, something greater. Afton always did have that childish ambition of being the unstoppable Demon King, after all. Yes, no doubt of it. He would begin by doing nothing less than becoming America's most powerful criminal mastermind, perhaps even international. No longer would the widespread hauntings of Afton be a debated over topic on dying thread boards and coffee shops. He now had the chance to acquire power beyond imagining. If he pleased these angelic demons enough, he felt, blessings of glorious nature could be bestowed upon him. His name echoed in horrifying whispers. His deeds legend, entire legions to command, a world ablaze in his terrible wake. Alright guys, that was half of the first chapter. I will finish the next half on the next video. Thank you all so much for watching. Hopefully I will improve reading-wise as time goes on. This is my very first time doing any of this, so please forgive me if I've made any mistakes and errors, of which I'm sure there's quite plenty. And yeah, stay tuned for more Krosky Von